The icy embrace of Antarctica has fascinated humans ever since we discovered the continent. Embark on a chilling journey through the untamed realms of Antarctica with 5 gripping tales. From ill-fated expeditions to mysterious deaths, animal attacks, or unfortunate accidents, these stories unveil the perilous beauty and unforgiving nature of Earth's southernmost continent, where heroism and tragedy intersect in the pursuit of scientific discovery. There was one thing the men knew for sure. It was damn cold. But they'd made it, sort of. Their accomplishment was bittersweet. It was on the night of January 17, 1912, when Captain Robert Falcon Scott and his men reached the South Pole. They had set off 2 years earlier aboard the Terra Nova, a former whaler, with a pretty clear goal in mind: to become the first explorers to ever reach the South Pole and through this, bring pride to Britain, their beloved nation. As they stood there, though, after 2 years of toil and hope, the men faced an unforgiving truth. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen and his men had beaten them to their goal. And now they had to face 800 very long and harrowing miles back to their base camp. Led by Scott, the men began their arduous journey back. But Antarctica was old and powerful, and it had other plans for the 5 explorers. Captain Robert Falcon Scott was, by all accounts, the right leader for this expedition. He was a Royal Navy officer who had joined his first ship at the age of 13. Even more importantly, though, was the fact that he had led expeditions before. His first expedition, which took place between 1901 to 1904, was the first time Antarctic land had been extensively explored for zoological and geological purposes. The men had to cover several miles a day if they wanted to reach their base camp before the end of the sledging season. Hauling the sledge, which carried their supplies through ice and snow, was no easy feat. But the first few days of their trip back went well. The temperatures were normal for the period, cold but still bearable. Then things took a sudden turn. Slowly but surely it became obvious to Scott that they were covering fewer and fewer miles by the day, and it got much colder. Each of the 5 men was now plagued by vicious frostbite. The freezing temperatures made it harder for the paraffin-burning stove to heat food and melt ice and snow, making it more difficult for them to get water. To make matters worse, many of the fuel cans were leaky, which meant fuel had to be rationed, and their food supplies were diminishing by the day. Navigation errors led the men to mazes of crevasses and fissures, which were especially hard to conquer. On February 17th, the party took a massive hit when Petty Officer Edgar Evans collapsed, his eyes wild, his hands frostbitten. Evans died at 12:30 a.m., perhaps because of a head injury he'd previously suffered during the expedition. A few days later, conditions on the surface of the ice improved, and with this, the remaining 4 men were able to cover more miles than before. But the unbearable cold endured. By the end of February, temperatures dropped to a staggering -36. 4F. Once again, the men's pulling power greatly diminished. And as the party's supplies decreased, so did the men's calorie intake. Thus, they lost a lot of fat, and after that, a lot of muscle, which in turn made them more susceptible to the cold. It was a vicious cycle. On March 2nd, Captain Lawrence Oates, another of the party, revealed to his companion his feet were in a wretched condition, deeply affected by the cold. By then, it was almost impossible for him to pull the sledge. On March 17th, Oates woke up, dreading that he was still alive. He had hoped to die and thus increase the others' chance of survival. A blizzard was raging outside the tent. Full of resolve, Oates struggled to his feet. "I am just going outside and it may be some time." He was swallowed by the blizzard as soon as he stepped outside, never to be seen again. Shaked by their own poor condition and by their companion's sacrifice, Scott and the 2 other remaining men, Edward Wilson and Henry Bowers, still managed to carry on. It was all in vain. On March 19th, the 3 of them pitched their tents for the last time. They were starving and so cold. "We are getting weaker and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more." This was Scott's last journal entry on March 29th. Their bodies were found by a search party in November 1912, covered by snow and ice. The Twin Otter aircraft hovered above Antarctica's icy expanse. Inside the aircraft, the 6 daredevils revised their plan once again. This was it. the first civilian skydiving endeavor over the South Pole. They were about to make history, or so they thought. It all started when Adventure Network International, or ANI, a private company that provided tours to the interior of the icy continent, announced this new adventure. A team of 6 seasoned and daring skydivers assembled soon after. 36-year-old Steve Mulholland was to be the jump master. 43-year-old Ray Miller coordinated the trip. 4 others, 2 Norwegians, an Austrian, and an American, paid $22,000 for the opportunity. All of them were ambitious and experienced. Once the date was set, they were good to go. The 6 men assembled at Patriot Hills, their base camp, where they worked out the details of the mission. Then they boarded their chartered Twin Otter aircraft and flew for 6 hours. They landed early on the morning of December 7, 1997, at about 7 a.m., near the Amundsen-Scott Station, named so for the first explorers to reach the South Pole. The group's excitement was almost palpable. Each passing minute brought them closer to their goal. But first, logistics. They took several thumbs-up photos. They laid out a large orange square tarp, their landing target. 2 Adventure Network International ANI personnel, a physician and a field guide, accompanied them. Several others, workers at the pole, gathered around to witness the mind-boggling endeavor. Then the group of 6 boarded the aircraft once again. It was a sunny day with clear weather. The temperature at the pole was a manageable -25 degrees Fahrenheit, with almost no wind. The plane climbed to 8,000 feet above ground level, which actually translates to about 17,500 feet above sea level. There was an oxygen bottle aboard the aircraft, but only 3 of the 6 men chose to use it. Mulholland, Miller, and Rizak, the Austrian, declined. Miller, the trip's coordinator, and Mulholland, the jump master, revised the plan. Miller, Mulholland, Rizak, and Michael Kearns, the other American, would hook up in a so-called 4-way formation, then track away from each other and open their chutes. The 2 Norwegians would then do a tandem jump. Up there, the temperature was close to -58 degrees Fahrenheit. The white, snowy surface of the continent below was blinding. Miller and Mulholland were the first to jump. Kearns followed, and then Rizak. It quickly became obvious that things weren't going according to plan. Dazed by the jump, the temperature, and the lack of visual references on the white snow surface, Kearns made several attempts to link up with the others before realizing they simply weren't there. The man decided to pull his reserve chute ripcord. As he started to pull it, the chute was deployed automatically by his AAD, a safety system which is responsible for deploying a skydiver's reserve parachute in the event that the jumper is unable to do so. Then Kearns looked down and realized Mulholland, Miller, and Rizak were already far below him, and it looked like they weren't going to make it. They were hurtling toward the unforgiving ice below. But what happened? As it turned out, Mulholland's partially opened canopy hadn't had the time to inflate. As for Miller and Rizak, they'd never even stood a chance, as they never even pulled their ripcords. They fell for about 60 seconds before hitting the ground and penetrating 3 feet deep into the South Pole's surface, about half a mile from the target. Kearns and the 2 Norwegians all landed safely, but their shock was immense. Soon enough, people on snowmobiles, led by the station doctor, located and recovered the 3 bodies. By 14 o'clock that day, the bodies were on the way back to Patriot Hills. Authorities arrived at the conclusion that there wasn't any big cause for the horrifying accident, but rather an accumulation of small errors that led to the deaths of Mulholland, Miller, and Rizak. As such, the wind chill produced by the freefall velocity, the lack of visual references on the snow surface, the 3 men's refusal to use oxygen, and their chute's lack of an AAD system were all to blame for their deaths. Concerns have been raised about safety protocols and the risks inherent in such daring endeavors following the accident. Not much is known about leopard seals except that they're at the top of the Antarctic food chain. They are solitary animals inhabiting one of the world's harshest places. Spread out over millions of square miles of pack ice, leopard seals are free to feed on a wide range of prey. They have nothing to fear except maybe the orca, the species' only natural predator. They don't even fear us humans. In fact, we fear them. And Kirsty Brown's story is one of the reasons why. On July 22, 2003, 28-year-old Kirsty Brown was on a mission. Despite her young age, Brown was a marine biologist working with the British Antarctic Survey, also known as BAS. She had joined BAS the previous year in 2002 on a 30-month contract after obtaining a degree in geology and an MSc in oceanography. Brown researched the significant impact that the grounding of icebergs in shallow waters has on the marine life living on the seafloor. Antarctica isn't for the faint of heart or for the inexperienced, but Kirsty Brown was far from that. Not only was she an accomplished researcher, but she was also a qualified scientific diver. She had dive leader qualifications and professional diver certifications. She had dived in Greenland, Australia, and the UK, but not even her extensive experience could save her from the icy continent's perils. That Tuesday, Kirsty Brown left the Rothera Research Station on a routine snorkeling mission to check on some scientific equipment designed to measure the movement of ice on the seabed. Although she was the only one who would go into the water, Brown was accompanied by a two-person shore cover team just in case. There's always inherent danger when dealing with the Antarctic Peninsula, and protocol dictates that they shouldn't take any chances. Scientists were instructed not to enter the sea if a leopard seal is seen, and to leave the water immediately if one arrives. But that day they didn't see any seals. However, just because you can't see tragedy lurking doesn't mean it won't strike all the same. Kirsty Brown was about 82 feet from the shore, working efficiently. She didn't see anything unusual, nor did her colleagues who were watching from the shore. And then it was already too late. Leopard seals are clumsy on land, but they are more than fast when swimming. In fact, they can swim at speeds up to 25 miles per hour. And they're inquisitive animals, especially if something looks like prey. It took mere seconds for the leopard seal to attack Kirsty Brown. The animal took hold of the young woman and dragged her deep beneath the waters. Brown's colleagues watched in horror from the shore, but they didn't let the shock overcome them. Instead, they called for help, hoping it would come fast enough to save the young scientist. 10 minutes later, a rescue boat managed to pull Kirsty Brown out of the water. The woman wasn't breathing. The rescuers tried to resuscitate her. Each and every minute was crucial. They then took Brown to the research station, where the base's doctor and Brown's colleagues tried for an hour to revive her, to no avail. She was declared dead. News of the attack sent shockwaves through the scientific community, prompting an outpouring of grief and disbelief. Dr. Brown was revered for her passion and dedication, for her enthusiasm and determination. Lloyd Peck, who led LATEST, the program Brown worked on, expressed his desire to continue the scientist's project as a way to honor her memory. Speculation arose as to what might have triggered the aggressive behavior of the leopard seal, whether it was provoked by Dr. Brown's presence, or was driven by instinctive territoriality in its natural habitat. Some marine biologists even suspect that leopard seals, which have been known to stalk people, could possibly attack humans on purpose. As he walked between the remote observatory and the main base at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, Rodney Marks began feeling unwell. At 32 years old, Marks wasn't only a brilliant astrophysicist, but he was also full of life and physically fit. After all, rigorous physical screening is required for anyone willing to work at the South Pole. It's safe to say that Marks's feeling unwell was unusual. Marks struggled to breathe as his vision became weak. He decided sleep would help and went to bed early. But sleep wasn't the much-needed respite Marks had hoped for. He awoke on the morning of May 12, 2000 at about 5:30 a.m., vomiting blood. His stomach burned excruciatingly. Marks left his room and rushed toward the base's biomed facility. But the base physician, Dr. Robert Thompson, couldn't pinpoint the cause of Marks's suffering. And with Amundsen Scott South Pole Station being the world's loneliest human outpost, a place where internet connection and phone signal are down a lot of the time, there was no way to reach the outside world for help, or at least a second opinion. Rodney Marks returned to the biomed facility 3 times that day, and his condition was getting visibly worse each time he did so. The burning feeling in his stomach now radiated throughout his entire body. His eyes were extremely sensitive, so much so that Marks had to wear sunglasses, even though the sun hadn't risen over the base in multiple weeks. He vomited blood multiple times. Thompson struggled to diagnose the man. Was it alcohol withdrawal? After all, Marks frequently visited the base's bar. Was it simply a very bad case of anxiety-induced illness, caused by Antarctica's remoteness and harsh conditions? The 3rd time Rodney Marks returned to the biomed facility, he was aggressive and distressed to the point of hyperventilation, making it impossible for the doctor to consult him. Finally, Thompson injected him with a strong antipsychotic to calm him down. Marks quieted down. Then his heart stopped. The station's trauma team, all volunteers, rushed to resuscitate the man. But after 45 minutes of effort, it became clear it was all in vain. Rodney Marks was dead, killed by his mysterious affliction. It was May 12, 2000, which means it was both cold and dark, and no plane would be able to fly and retrieve Marks's body. Thus, the 49 people living at the base, including Mark's partner, had to keep on going, knowing that one of them was dead. The body was kept in a storage room at the station for 6 months before flights resumed. Then it was finally flown to Christchurch in New Zealand, where a startling discovery was made. Rodney Marks's blood contained lethal traces of methanol, a highly toxic chemical Marks himself used to clean his telescopes. But the amounts found were huge. The pathologist who made the discovery believed the methanol was virtually certain to be ingested. So despite what his colleagues had assumed, there was nothing natural about Marks's death. What happened then? Nobody knows, though theories abound. Suicide, some say, despite the fact that coroner Richard McElrea ruled it out. One theory posited was that he might have inadvertently poisoned himself while attempting to distill his own alcohol, or at least that's what coroner McElrea seemed to suggest. But what about foul play? For years, the New Zealand police have attempted to find the truth, but U.S. authorities, which run the base, ignored their request to see the full list of staff at the base at the moment of Marks's death. Eventually, once this was obtained on the internet, police sent questionnaires to all 49 of Marks's co-workers, but only 13 of them replied. According to New Zealand police, a full investigation had been carried out by U.S. organizations, but they have refused to disclose their findings. With suicide being ruled out and theories about third-party involvement dismissed, Rodney Marks's death remains shrouded in mystery. But there's one thing authorities know for sure. The base had a blood analysis machine, which could have assisted in diagnosing Marks and maybe curing him, if only it were correctly calibrated. At 50 years old, Gordon Hamilton's reputation preceded him. He was a renowned researcher, a glaciologist at the University of Maine. Hamilton dedicated his life to studying frozen water in all its shapes and forms: snow, sea ice, glacial ice, river ice, and permafrost. Hamilton knew it all. He aimed to understand our planet's changing climate. His unusual work often took him to places most of us wouldn't even dream about. Antarctica, with its icy maze of crevasses, fissures, and snow, was one such place. Hamilton's research aimed to understand the relationship between melting ice sheets and rising sea levels. The man deemed it important enough to undertake sometimes dangerous endeavors. It was Saturday, October 22, 2016. Gordon Hamilton and his team were on White Island, in the Ross Archipelago of Antarctica. The island, which gets its name from the mantle of snow that covers it, was the backdrop of Hamilton's newest research mission. His goal was to investigate the numerous crevasses in Antarctica. Crevasses are cracks that extend deep into the continent's snow and ice, and are usually huge. Hamilton himself believed you could drop a handful of school buses down a crevasse and not make a dent. Moreover, Hamilton and his team had to fill some of these crevasses with snow to ensure supplies could be transported to the nearby McMurdo Station, the largest U.S. research station in Antarctica. It was hard work and inherently dangerous, but Gordon Hamilton had a lot of experience, and he was an optimist who lightened the mood of his team. Unfortunately, that was to be the man's last mission. Hamilton was riding his snowmobile when the icy expanse of Antarctica claimed his life. It happened so quickly. One minute he was simply doing his job, as so many times before. The next he was plunging 100 feet into a crevasse. Hamilton hadn't seen it. The terrain was tricky and blinding white. Hamilton's body was recovered and flown back to his home state, Maine. Hamilton's tragic death served as a somber reminder of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of scientific discovery. The news of Hamilton's accident drew attention to the risks faced by researchers working in Antarctica's unforgiving environment. His colleagues and peers mourned the loss of a brilliant scientist whose contributions to climate science were invaluable. He was just a delightful person. He was super friendly, and he could always be counted on to have a good sense of humor, even in sometimes stressful situations, said Paul Majewski, the Climate Change Institute's director.